Oh, bonjour. Bienvenue. Café avec Etienne. Welcome to Coffee with Stephen. So, this week's blog is entitled The People. And it's somewhat of a little exploration on something that's taking place in Second Amendment jurisprudence right now, specifically at the state level, although it could theoretically extend to a federal thing as well. So, what am I talking about? Well, as many of you know quite well, we had the Supreme Court decision of New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruen. This Supreme Court decision created the test to determine whether or not a statute, gun control statute specifically, although it can very well and has now extended to other constitutional amendments, specifically the First Amendment, but it created this constitutional test that is outside of what we call a balancing test, balancing state interests versus individual rights. In the case, Justice Thomas said that balancing test already took place during the ratification of the Constitution. So now, when we are challenging a statute, claiming that it runs afoul of the Second Amendment, the first hurdle that we as plaintiffs need to do is show that the Second Amendment has in fact been implicated by the statute. That's what we're going to be talking about here in a second. Assuming that we are able to overcome that hurdle, then the burden shifts to the state. And now the state needs to show that the statute is consistent with the history of firearms regulations, specifically at the time of the ratification back in 1791. Now, when this case was first decided, we looked at this and we said, this is going to be basically insurmountable for the state as it relates to the vast majority of gun control laws. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see what type of legal theory they're going to put forth as to why these gun control laws still are in fact constitutional. Well, we're starting to see that manifest. What is interesting is that they're not attacking the history, text, and regulatory traditions back in 1791. What they're really focusing in on is whether or not the plaintiff can show that the Second Amendment has even been implicated by the statute. More specifically, whether or not the plaintiff falls within the category of who the Second Amendment actually affords protection to, specifically the people. And what they're trying to do is really narrow the scope of who the people are. Now, if they're successful in this, and up to this point they really haven't been, but if they are successful in this, this could have long-term implications that far transcend the Second Amendment. Because if you're not part of the people, then by definition, you sort of become property of the state. And if you're property of the state, that may very well violate the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. This is all in the blog, and I do really encourage you to read this blog this week. It kind of shows you where we're going with this Second Amendment jurisprudence. As always, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.